Thank you for joining me while I make the second attempt to create a large outdoor planter. I'm very excited to try to get one of these to work. My first attempt collapsed from the bottom based on how I started with my foot and a couple issues with my connections on the walls. So here's to looking forward to not having that happen again. Pardon the little bit of stuffiness as I get over a sickness, but here I have 4 pounds of clay. I'm just going to start by making the base. I tend to not do very well with anything over 5 pounds, so here I'm just using a nice comfortable amount so I can really make sure that this is centered and strong on the bottom. So learning from my first attempt, I did not make the base wide enough before I opened it up and created the little lip for the wall. So here I'm just trying to push that out as much as I can while still keeping the thickness of the bottom with enough to support what we're working with. Now, I didn't really look at how high the general platform already was, so I went in to open it and realized I really don't want it much thinner than it already is. So I'm going to use my sponge and kind of pull back a little bit of clay to fill in the little thumb hole that I created and try to get this back to a fairly even surface again. And then compress that down to make sure that it's nice and strong and ready to be the base of the pot. And here I'm just now starting to pull up the side a little bit to start that brim and that lip that I can work off of. So just kind of evening that out, making sure there's no major thick spot on the very bottom there where it starts to curve. So it's ready to go for the walls. And as mentioned in my first attempt, I really want to keep the walls nice and thick so that as we make this a very tall and heavy pot, they have the strength to hold that amount of weight. So I'm just lifting this just enough to have something to work from but I want to keep it nice and thick so that nothing starts to collapse earlier than expected. So now that I got all the extra moisture off, I'm going to let this sit for a little while I go and make the sections for building the walls up. So over on my work table, I have some slabs that I made. Since I do not have an extruder, which is a pretty common way to do this, I am using thickly rolled slabs and now cutting them into strips, making sure they're the same width so that putting them next to each other won't make any crazy things happen. So just cutting these up to allow myself to put them on similar to a coil pot. And now that I have all of my slabs cut up into the strips, I'm just going to make sure there's a layer of plastic between each set of them so that nothing sticks over time throughout the day and that they don't dry out. My initial goal was to use an entire bag of clay. At this point, I'll probably be ending up using about half a bag or so. So this is about 2/3 of a bag here, just to show kind of what's left from my first attempt of doing this process. Alright, so I'm going to turn the fan off now that it's dried for a little while and start building these walls up with those slabs that were cut. So now while placing these slabs, I'm making sure that the lip of the slab itself is slightly inside that shape of the initial base, just to make sure that I have enough control with it to not open the form too quickly. How you place a coil or slab is really going to affect the initial movement of how things are pulled up and building out. So especially with the momentum of a wheel, you want to make sure that I have that a little bit more in because it's much easier for it to be pushed out than pull it back in. And here I'm kind of pulling a little bit of clay from the top and bottom to make sure that they're starting to fuse together a little bit before I start really pulling on it. And for this part of getting the second slab on there, I'm making sure to line up both pieces, kind of where they should meet, overlapping slightly, and then cutting at the same angle to make sure that there is a slight angle that will allow them to connect better and that they will actually line up. Now that I have the two slabs pretty well attached, I am going to start the actual throwing process again. So I'm going to start by making sure everything is hydrated well. Nothing's going to really stick or pull on something against the motion of the wheel. Then I will compress where those seams were a little bit and push down slightly on the rim to make sure it's truly connected to the base of the pot. And then from there, I'll treat it like a regular throwing, where I will do a pull to kind of extend that extra slab that I put on there. It won't really pull a great amount since we're keeping the walls fairly thick, but definitely will add some height for every slab that I am putting on this piece. And with the first couple pieces of slab put on there, I'm going to make sure the rim is covered to keep it from getting too dry, and then let this sit for a half hour. So it looks like everything is firming up pretty well, but is still flexible enough to work with. I'm just going to sponge off that rim a little bit since it was a little bit warped from putting the paper towel on. And then I'm just going to go through the same process as the first row. We're going to put those slabs slightly on the inside, get them all pushed on, and then pull that row as well. So now that I have most of the pulling done, I'm just going to go in with my wooden rib and try to get this as evenly vertical as possible, since it is pretty lumpy here and there is some inconsistency in how that top edge is starting to form. I just want to kind of get it into a nice cylindrical form. So I let that rest again for 30 minutes with the fan, and it's time to take that protective layer of wet paper towels off the top and continue through this process. So now that this is being more successful, I'm going to show kind of the start of this row and then start speeding up so that you could just see the progression of the piece as I continue to do the same thing for the rest of that building part of this process. All right, let's speed things up a little bit. All right, now that it has been built up and I've used all the clay that I had prepared for the slabs that I can use for this, I am going to kind of just clean up this outer section, kind of make sure that the shaping that I worked on is actually where it needs to be and I don't have any weird marks from the ribs. And then it's really just final cleanup and enjoy. I'm so excited that this piece made it to the end, and I'm very surprised at this being the shape that it turned out as, because that wasn't really planned. I didn't really have a plan, but didn't expect this shape, and I think I really, really like it. So I can't wait to get this thing dried and fired and glazed and be able to put some beautiful plants in it this summer. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with me while I make this pot. I'll see you guys next time.